Hey y'all! First I want to apologize for this series has taken a little longer than I expected. Hopefully you guys can skip ahead in some of the videos that you find a little more boring, but some people really seem to enjoy this really detailed, solder by solder, joint by joint build on this. And so I promise at the end we'll do a TLDR video that catches you up in a real short way about what we built here. And the key things to note, we are going to change our plans a little bit, which you're going to have to learn to expect for this channel. We're going to be changing things up as we go along. I decided not to put the bulk in right now. We're going to go ahead and mount this main board. I'm going to use some shielded wire to hook up these RCA jacks, and we're going to leave this out. And what I want to learn from this is, did the better components and spacing the boards apart fix the hum and hiss problem, which was minor in my previous phono stage, or does it really require separation with a piece of metal here? And that's what we're going to learn here. So hopefully we don't need to go to this extra work here, which will make things easier for you guys when you decide to build this if you just space the boards apart. So we're going to jump into doing that. And then I keep saying this, I know I sound like a broken record. This really shouldn't take long. I got to hook up 4 power wires and 4 RCA jacks, and we're done. So let's jump into that, and then I'm going to go hook this thing up and listen to it and see if what this does as far as the hum and noise and just how this thing sounds to the previous board that was built with all of the China components. So let's jump into this. Okay, we're going to be connecting the RCA jacks up to the board now. And like I showed you earlier, the output is right here. And the input is on the other end of the board, which we'll be connecting later. But we're going to be using this shielded 24 gauge wire that has an outer copper braided wire with a 24 gauge center connector. I actually just robbed these off of some old RCA cables that I had, and it works really well. Just make sure it's not the foil type outer shielding, that it actually is the copper braided, kind of wire stuff. Or you can buy some, whatever kind of cable you want to use, but I just had some of that, and that's what I'm using. So I've already done one side just to kind of make sure I'm getting everything the right length and everything before I get on the camera. We want a 2-inch length of this wire. So we're gonna, and actually like exactly 2 inches really worked well. So we're gonna mark that off. Cut off 2 inches. There we go. Okay. So with this wire I have, you can get the 1.3 millimeter stripper, and you want to go back just a little under a 1/4 inch. And that gives you a little bit of the outer part to work with. And gently go in there until the outer part pulls off, and you've got, we actually probably want a little more than that for the RCA jack in. And I'll measure this just so you can get it on the first try. I'm used to kind of eyeballing about how much you need. You want to make sure you get all of this stuff. You don't want to leave even just the tiniest single strand left, or it will short it out and it won't have any signal. Because all it takes is it's a very minute signal, and just one of those little strands will actually short it out. So that ended up being Yeah, that's right at a 1/4 inch. So I was right. Then we want to come in with our 24 gauge stripper and get just the very tip of the center part exposed like that. Then get some rosin soldering flux and go ahead and dip the outer part in and get a little bit on the center too. Okay, so we're gonna put the wire onto the jack first. So we take this off, and I think I mentioned this earlier. You want to get a little needle file like this and file off this plating till you get down to the brass. Like that. And so we're going to be putting this, see how this thing's curved? We're going to be putting this wire in from this direction, and then the outer part's going to connect like that. So, and see how that braiding is, see how that wire was already kind of spreading out? We want to twist this up, and then get our soldering iron and tin that a little bit. Then do the same thing here. Twist this up. Make sure it's to a point. And tin just the tip of it. You don't want to tin the whole thing down to the insulation. Just the very, like that. Just put a little breath on there, and that'll keep it from fraying on you. Then you want to come in and see how this is like sticking straight out. We want to bend that in about like that. And we're going to end up doing this on both ends. It actually would probably be pretty smart to go ahead and do the other end at the same time while we're doing this. Get it looking like that. And somebody had mentioned having like a third hand for holding stuff up like this. If any of y'all have like a little third hand thing that you really like, that maybe has a magnifying glass too for doing this kind of small work, if you'll want to link it in the comments, that would be awesome. And I will, it'll say it's being held for review because all the porn sites that try to link to my channel, but I will approve the message so everybody can see it. We can share that info. Okay, the next thing you want to do is get a little bit, just get a little bit of this flux and put it in here. And then on the part that you file down. The other thing I'd recommend too is getting like a couple water sitting over here to the side, so that once you get this soldered, you can cool that terminal off, because there is plastic in here, and you don't want to melt the plastic. But you got to get this pretty hot because we're soldering actually to the body of the jack, at least with the terminals I have. So the next thing you want to do is put the center one through. We're going to solder the center one first. And it's a pretty small hole. And we may, like I said, this is somewhere like a little third hand thing would be really handy. But I'm just going to use my little pliers there to kind of hold this up for me. And get the tip clean. And then solder the center part. that. Then let that cool off a second. Okay, and then we're going to come over here to the side and solder this one on. And what I usually do is I pull that over out of the way to start with and then warm this up until you can see the solder flowing against the metal itself. If I do it from this side, y'all will be able to see it better. You want to get this brass hot enough where the solder is actually not just sitting on top of it, but it's like melting into, the solder melts when you touch it to the brass, like that. And then I come back, and be careful because this thing is smoking hot right now. And then go like this, melt the wire into it. And then, once it's cooled off a sec, put it in the water, like this. And then we have a super secured thing onto our RCA jack. Like I said, I really like these because you're soldering the wire right to the body instead of some of the cheaper ones. Let me see if I can find one of these cheaper ones. Okay, here's one of the cheaper ones. And I'm sure these work, but after seeing these really quality ones, I quit using these. Okay, this style has, you solder onto this wire here, which is direct soldered, but then the other side solders onto this little tab that you have to then slide under here, and it's, it's got a mechanical connection here, but as small as the signal is, I just really don't like the idea of, this being a separate piece from the body of the RCA jack. And like these are, dime a dozen little cheap RCA jacks that most of these Chi-Fi amps use for their inputs, and they just, I don't know, they just don't seem high quality to me. These just seem to me like a lot higher quality piece. And so, anyway, you can use what you want, but I highly recommend you hunt up some of those. And I found those on eBay. They're not super expensive. When I found them not on eBay, they were real expensive. So be careful out there that, there are some people selling these that are asking way more than I feel like they're worth. Okay, the next thing we want to do is, because these two wires are pretty close together like that, we want to be able to use these two holes right here. But the problem is, because they've got this little 6-pin or 9-pin connector here for a volume control pot, this pin here goes over to this volume control pot, and this is the actual negative. So we want to connect this pin to this hole so that then we can use these two to hook our shielded wire up to. And that's easy enough to do. We turn the board over, we get a little piece that we've cut off of a resistor, and again, remember, this is a very, very low power signal. So we don't need a big fat wire to transmit this signal. And we just want to bend this up so it goes between these two holes. Or actually, it's going between these two holes down on the end. Just like that. So we can bridge across those two holes. So we go ahead and Heat this up. Solder that one in. And bridge across these two pins right here. And then we're going to go ahead and we'll solder in that hole too. So we heat that up, and then we just stick that wire in there and let that cool off. And that's our positive. And then on the other one, we can get our little pliers and we want it just to go straight in that other hole like that. Let that cool off. And there we go. Now we got our two RCA jacks, and they're going to come up through the top of the board or top of the chassis like this. So, and we went ahead and screwed these on like I showed you in the other video. You just kind of stick the screw through like that and get this, hold it with your finger and screw them down. You don't want to get them tight yet. And we got all of those in. So we're going to go ahead and attach this board. We got put two more of the stands here and then attach this board to the chassis. I know a couple of people, one of my friends and somebody in the comments was asking, you know, why don't you breadboard these, or why don't you power these up before you put them in the chassis? You can absolutely do that if you want. I've gotten so used to just kind of putting things together, and because I'm not in a big hurry, if I have to pull the board back out to, change a resistor or something, or if I have a problem or with a solder joint or something, it's only 6 screws. I mean, it's not like it's the end of the world to take the thing back apart. So, and I just feel more comfortable having the whole thing assembled when I'm powering it up and not have things just kind of laying out on a bench. So let's go ahead and put this board in. Here's the two inputs, and we're going to solder them from the top side. So we'll put the board in like this, and then I'm going to go ahead and put the screws in that hold this down to the chassis. Line up one of the screw holes, get a screw started, and just be careful that you don't cross thread the screw into one of the standoffs, because they're pretty soft aluminum. It would be pretty easy to cross thread it if you're not careful. And once you cross thread a hole in something like that, it's almost impossible to ever fix it. And so you're going to be, ordering some more standoffs, which I don't think anybody wants to do. As you can see, these holes line up really nice, which tells me we did a really nice job drilling our holes. I think these black screws look nice on this black painted chassis. If you were going to leave it bare aluminum, you might want to get some little chrome screws. And I've got a zillion of these little chrome screws, so I use some of those on the inside. I know I've been kind of trashing on these made in China components, but this board's actually very well made, I think. So even though I think the only thing we used from the original kit was the bridge rectifier for the tube heaters. The board itself's nice. And it will be interesting to see how different this sounds from the other one that I built using I used probably about 90% of the parts that came in the last board, to see if there really is a difference in the sound using, you know, known quality resistors instead of the unknown quality China ones. Now we're going to tighten up the screws on the inside, because we left them just kind of finger tight. Okay, to finish putting these jacks up, these have one of the washers, let me zoom in here. One of the washers has a little step on it like that. And that one goes on first. Then you put the jack through the hole. Then we turn the chassis over, and you want to hold that shoulder part centered on the hole. Then put the other washer on, and then tighten down one on the top. And I think just getting them finger tight like there is good enough. I mean, it's got some little notches here. Let me see if I can zoom in on that. It's got some little notches here. You could probably, put some pliers in, or some, I'm sure there's a little 3-pronged tool that they use at a factory. But you can see it's got knurling on it where you can get a pretty good grip on it. And I think just getting them really good finger tight is good enough. So let's put the other one in. And then we want to make sure that when we put the ones in the front, that we match the color coding for the right and left channel when we're doing this. And there we go. And that's the way that's the outputs. My last one, I probably should have, but I didn't, because this distance, you can see how short a distance it is from here to here. I didn't use shielded cable because I really didn't think there was a need. But this time, since I did have to deal with some hum, I'm going to use shielded cable this time. So let me get one side kind of done and figured out how I'm going to do it, and then I'll show you the other side. We'll put the ground wire on it. Then the only thing left we have to do is connect the 285 volts DC from here to here, then from here to here, and then the 6.3 volts DC goes from here to these two lugs right here.